At exactly 7:00 a.m., I watched a crane lower a 2-ton concrete Jersey barrier onto the only road out of Ironwood Estates, and the dust cloud that erupted turned the HOA president's perfect light blue suit the color of dirty ash. She stumbled out of her Range Rover coughing and screaming that she'd have the sheriff put me in handcuffs by lunch. She didn't know that 45 minutes earlier I'd sold the ground under her tires to the U.S. Department of the Interior for exactly $1, and the federal rangers were already on their way. 3 weeks earlier, none of this felt real. I was standing on a ridgeline wiping the lens of my laser scanner, looking down at a valley that used to be quiet, so quiet you could hear wind comb through tall grass before someone decided quiet was wasted space and poured money all over it. Ironwood Estates sat down there like a crown made of stone and glass. A gate, a fountain, a clubhouse that looked like a resort, and a homeowners association that acted like it was its own government. I didn't come there for their fountain. I came because I'm a forensic surveyor. I make a living chasing ghost geography, old property lines, buried pins, rivers that got rerouted, land that got adjusted on paper when nobody was looking. My clients are usually insurance companies or agencies that don't like surprises. And I hate surprises too. The only thing I hate more is arrogance. The day Ironwood Estates became my problem started with a phone call about my uncle's estate. I inherited a ridiculous amount of land, nearly 1,000 acres of rugged valley ridges, and an old corridor that cut straight through it like a scar. It sounded like a blessing, until I opened the county map and realized something that made my stomach go cold. The entire HOA, all those luxury homes and manicured lawns, sat on land that should have still been in my family's name. And the only road in and out of their community, that road ran right through a strip that didn't belong to them either. So I did what I always do. I pulled records. I requested deeds. I compared the legal descriptions to the actual terrain. And at first I honestly thought I was the one missing something, like maybe there was an easement I hadn't found, or a sale I didn't know about, or some perfectly normal explanation that didn't involve crime. Then I saw the signature. The deed that supposedly transferred the core parcels into the developer's hands had a beautiful, clean signature, smooth, confident, almost like calligraphy. It was dated years after my uncle's accident. My uncle lost both his hands in 1998. There are medical records, x-rays, photographs, the kind of proof you don't argue with unless you're either delusional or desperate. And suddenly this wasn't a paperwork glitch. It was theft. The first time I met the HOA president, I was kneeling near their north gate, scraping mulch away from an old iron pin location and trying not to look like someone about to ruin a lot of people's day. A shadow fell over me. "Tiffany, excuse me." I looked up and there she was, Tiffany Vance, HOA president, perfectly styled, blonde hair, sunglasses, that light blue suit like she'd been sewn into authority. A security guard hovered behind her like a trained dog. "Tiffany, what do you think you're doing?" I stood up slowly, because I've learned that sudden movement around people like her is basically a trigger. "Me, survey work. I'm verifying boundary markers." She laughed, one of those laughs that isn't humor, it's dismissal. "Tiffany, there are no boundaries here. This is private property. You need a permit from the HOA to do anything in Ironwood Estates." I glanced at the guard's hand resting a little too comfortably near his belt. "Me, I don't need permission to locate a survey pin. And I definitely don't need permission to stand on land that isn't yours." That's when her face changed. Not anger, yet something worse. Offended certainty. Like I'd just told her gravity was optional. "Tiffany, you are trespassing. And if you damage our landscaping, I will fine you. And if you refuse, I will place a lien. I can make your life very difficult, Mr. I didn't give her my name. I just pointed at my equipment case. "Me. This costs more than your SUV. Tell your guy to stop hovering like he's going to confiscate it." She didn't like that. Not one bit. Over the next week, the HOA escalated the way bullies always do when they realize fear isn't working. I got violation notices on my truck windshield that weren't even written correctly. I got threatening emails from Ironwood Legal that sounded like they were copied from a template. A tow truck showed up twice by HOA authorization, like they could just remove my property because Tiffany snapped her fingers. The best one. She held a special meeting and tried to ban me from the community entirely, like she could vote me out of land I'd inherited. And here's the part nobody talks about in these stories, the part that feels embarrassing to admit it started to work. Not because I believed her authority, because the pressure was constant, the intimidation was constant. Every day it was another letter, another threat, another smug smile from someone who'd been trained their whole life to believe money is the same as truth. One night I sat in my truck on the ridge staring down at their glowing windows, and I actually thought, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I misread the record chain. Maybe there's some legal trick I don't see. And then the darker thought followed right behind it. Even if I'm right, can I afford to fight them? Because fighting rich people isn't about being correct. It's about surviving long enough to prove it. I almost left. I almost drove home, filed my notes away, and told myself it wasn't worth it. But then I remembered my uncle. Not the estate value, not the acreage, not the money. The man. A man who couldn't even hold a pen anymore, and someone still forged his name like it was nothing. And that did something to me. It turned the doubt into heat. It turned the fear into focus. I went back to the maps and found the one thing Tiffany could never bully away: the corridor. The road. Parcel B, a narrow strip of land that Ironwood Estates depended on like a lifeline. They treated it like it was theirs. They collected HOA dues for road maintenance. They strutted around like the asphalt was born under their feet. But the parcel history didn't match their confidence. It had been shuffled, mislabeled, tucked into filings nobody reads unless they're paid to notice what's buried. And that's what I do. I notice what's buried. I moved fast. I filed what I needed to file. I got the corridor legally transferred into my control through the estate process. And the second it was mine, I understood the truth. I couldn't win this by playing HOA games. If I tried to block the road as a private citizen, they'd run to a judge, cry hardship, and get an emergency order in hours. They'd call in favors. They'd smear me as unstable. They'd make it a sob story about access. So I did the only thing that made sense. I handed the corridor to someone they couldn't intimidate. I contacted federal wildlife officials about an endangered nesting habitat that, funny enough, ran right along that same strip. I had photographs. I had environmental surveys. I had the kind of documentation that makes agencies move, especially when it's paired with one other detail, a paper trail of destroyed federal survey markers. Because yes, Tiffany went there. The night after I challenged her publicly, she sent men to dig. I didn't guess. I didn't assume. I watched it happen on thermal drone footage, 3 bright heat signatures hunched over the north gate stone wall, pickaxes and shovels digging up iron pins like they were burying a body. When you pull federal survey markers, you're not just being petty. You're committing a crime. And when you pay people to do it, you're leaving fingerprints all over the money. The town hall meeting at the clubhouse was Tiffany's attempt to execute me in public. She stood on a stage under warm lights acting like a savior, telling the residents there was a dangerous outsider threatening their property values. My name was on a screen behind her like I was a wanted poster. She talked about community integrity, while half the room nodded along, too comfortable to question the woman who approved their mailbox colors. I walked up the center aisle and my heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my fingertips. Tiffany, you don't belong here. Tiffany and Mike's security keep him away from the stage. I held up 2 pages. One was the deed signature. The other was my uncle's medical report. Me. This land was stolen. Your father forged a deed. He forged the signature of a man who didn't have hands. The room gasped. Tiffany lunged like a cat. She yanked the projector cord, killed the screen, and shrieked, "Tiffany, this is slander. Drag him out." The guards grabbed me, twisted my arms behind my back, and hauled me toward the doors. My palms scraped the asphalt when they shoved me outside like trash. And for a moment, just a moment, I lay there staring at the night sky over their perfect little kingdom, and I felt it again. That heavy, ugly thought. You can't beat them. Not here. Not in their house. Then I saw movement in the greenhouse windows on the side of the clubhouse. A shadow. A face. Maribel, the quiet woman who tended their plants, the one Tiffany never looked at unless she wanted something moved. Maribel tapped the glass once, then pointed to a giant lily pot in the corner. My phone buzzed in my pocket. One short message from the federal contact I'd been working with. Judge signed it. Parcel B transfers at dawn. Rangers ETA 700. Do it. I sat up, wiped blood off my hands, and I smiled because that's when I knew Tiffany had made a mistake. She thought this was a neighborhood dispute. She thought she could scream HOA and reality would flinch. She had no idea she'd just dragged the federal government into her little power trip. I drove my truck back up to the ridge, killed the lights, and waited in the dark while the clubhouse kept glowing below like a fire that didn't know it was about to run out of oxygen. At 6:50 the equipment arrived. A crane truck, workers, and 3 white SUVs with federal markings that did not care about Tiffany Vance's membership dues. The morning sky was painted in violent orange and purple when the crane swung into position. I drove down to the main entrance just as Tiffany's Range Rover rolled up right on time because people like her always assume the world will part for them. The cable hummed, the Jersey barrier lowered. Dust exploded across the asphalt, across her flawless paint job, across that stupid light blue suit. Tiffany burst out of the driver's seat, heels clicking like gunfire, screaming that she'd call the sheriff, screaming she'd sue me, screaming she'd have this barrier removed by noon. Tiffany, you can't do this. I'll have the sheriff put you in cuffs. A federal ranger stepped forward, built like stone face, like he'd never once been impressed by a tantrum, and bolted a metal sign into the concrete with a cordless drill. The sound cut through her, yelling like a blade. Ranger ma'am, step back. Tiffany froze, blinking like the words were in another language. Tiffany, move it. I live here. I own this community. I have an appointment. Ranger ma'am, you own the structures on adjacent parcels. You do not own this corridor. As of 0800 hours, this is a federally restricted sanctuary. If that vehicle moves 1 inch, I will arrest you for federal trespassing. Behind her, a line of luxury cars began forming, people late for work, late for school, late for golf. Honking like that would change federal law. They got out, saw the sign, saw their HOA president covered in dust screaming at a ranger, and panic rolled through the line like a wave. Residents shouting, "How do we get out?" I stepped forward. "Me, you walk. There's a pedestrian easement, 2 miles to the highway. Your cars stay here." Tiffany spun on me, eyes wild. "Tiffany, you planned this. You stole our road." "Me, I didn't steal anything. I bought it. And then I gave it to the only entity powerful enough to stop you." And then the part she never imagined happened. 2 unmarked black sedans rolled in behind the Ranger SUVs. 4 agents stepped out in dark windbreakers. Yellow letters on the back, FBI. Tiffany's face drained so fast it was like someone pulled a plug. She stopped screaming. She looked from the ranger to the agents, and for the first time I saw real fear, because deep down she knew. Not about the road, about everything. One agent walked straight to her. "Agent Tiffany Vance, we have a warrant for your arrest." She laughed high and hysterical. "Tiffany, for a property dispute." "Agent, not for the property. Wire fraud, embezzlement, destruction of federal survey markers." He held up a tablet and turned it toward her. On the screen was a frozen thermal image, 3 glowing figures digging up iron pins in the dark. Tiffany's mouth opened, closed, no sound. "Agent, the men you hired are in custody. They were very eager to explain who paid them." He nodded toward the clubhouse. "Agent, and our team is securing a greenhouse right now. They're looking for a ledger you've been keeping." Tiffany's knees buckled. She didn't collapse gracefully. She crumbled down the side of her Range Rover until she hit the asphalt dust coating her suit, turning that smug light blue into the exact shade of consequence. She looked up at the crowd, searching for an ally, for someone to save her, and all she found were people realizing their president had been robbing them while pretending to protect them. The agent snapped cuffs onto her wrists, and the click was the cleanest sound I'd heard in weeks. Lesson power isn't a title, power is the truth you can prove.